No money, no stick fight was the rallying cry that came true. Non-payment of stick fighters' participation in the preliminary round of the competition led to an impasse that saw last evening's event abandoned. Earlier today, Soyini Gray spoke to the NCC chairman, Winston Gypsy Peters, and he says the 2020 competitive season has now been cancelled. But first, let's take a look at how the commission came to this decision.
Everything was set. Last evening, the Arima Velodrome was converted into a stick-fighting GAYELLE.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are on a journey. The journey is to the final down at Guayakwarapang on the 19th of February.
But when the fighters arrived at the semi-final competition and discovered that the checks for the preliminary rounds were not there at the Arima Velodrome for them to collect, they refused to play.
Well, the reason for not fighting tonight is because there's the lack of funding. Because the players was promised that for the preliminaries and the final, they are going to get some form of payments. And they came up tonight and told us that there will not be no payment for no one.
The fee for the preliminary round in MORUGA was $3,800 per GAYELLE. That is a group of 4 people, the manager plus 3 stick fighters. The fee for the semi-final rounds was supposed to be $5,800.
Because I come to play sticker, I come to fight against my warriors. But when you tell me you know about the first check, so what's going on with the second check?
Our cameras caught the head of regional carnivals trying to negotiate with the various teams. The chairman of the Stick Fighting Commission says when the fighters heard that their checks were not in Arima, they got upset. They were offered $1,500 to placate them. They were then offered to also receive their fees for the semi-final round of the competition, an arrangement they had not been previously offered. Adams said 2 GAYELLEs out of the 6 agreed, but the rest wanted more money, and that was refused, and then the competition was cancelled. Soyini Gray, CNC3 News.
As a result of last evening's events and the back and forth between the National Carnival Commission and the 6 stick-fighting GAYELLEs that made it into the semi-final round, NCC cancelled the competition. NCC's chairman, Winston Gypsy Peters, says every year the commission was being held to ransom by the stick fighters, but no more.
The NCC decided that we are going to cancel any further activity, stick fighting activity that we have to take part in this year. So we would take no further part in any stick fighting for 2020.
He says the NCC board will meet at some point to decide what future relationship the commission will have with stick fighting. Peter says every year the fighters agitate for more money. He says for them to ask for it while the commission was actively trying to accommodate them was unfair. He reiterates that their checks for participation in the preliminary competition were ready. They were simply not brought to the Velodrome in time for last evening's competition.
I feel sad. It saddens me. But at the same time, people have to know that, you know, when you're doing things, these things take negotiation. And you don't just come and try to look like you're holding people to ransom to do what you want them to do. You know, that's not the way you do things.
He says after Carnival, the Commission will have a meeting to decide the way forward for them and stick fighting for next Carnival and beyond. Chairman Peters also said patrons of last evening's competition will be refunded their entrance fees. But one person who's not surprised by what happened at stick fighting last evening is Rondell Benjamin. He is the co-founder of the BOIS Academy, an organization that teaches and conducts research and outreach in the art form. He calls Kalinda. He says the conflict between the National Carnival Commission and the stick fighting community has been brewing for over 10 years. He says the stick fighters want consultation to improve their events, but the NCC has been resisting those calls.
I've tried. Last year I personally tried to approach Clarence more. I've tried every way possible to approach the stick fighting committee. I even tried directly to contact Colin Lucas. I've done everything I can because all of us in the fraternity recognize that it is an unsustainable approach.
He says the fighters are not wrong to say they are not sufficiently compensated. He says when they get injured, they can lose valuable days of work. Benjamin says the events are not even insured. He says maybe the NCC needs to relinquish management of Calendar.
It's either NCC recognizes they are unable to manage and grow this particular cultural form, and they cede it to Ministry of Culture as a direct martial tradition, or they cede it to Ministry of Sport or something, because it's just mismanagement at this point.
Benjamin says Kalinda is one of our oldest and richest cultural art forms, and it ought to be treated with much more respect.